各位师兄，大家早安。Good morning, dear Dharma brothers and sisters. I have a couple of things that we can all share here. I'm sure the MC yesterday reminded us, so I will speak. 欢迎仁波切。And when Rinpoche is teaching, please refrain from leaving your seat. So we should all stay here, not walking around, right? 所以当仁波切在讲课的时候，请大家都坐在位置上面，不要走来走去。那这是对这个我们法会及讲法的一种尊重啊。那么请大家把我们的手机电话现在就关起来。那包括我自己的啊 ，Please switch off your mobile phone to silent mode. 我们不可以照相，也不可以做 video， 就是不可以摄影。Please, there's no photography or video recording. And do not consume any food in the audience or take any coffee, drinks, and cups here. 请大家不要在这个法会的现场，因为这个现场就是像我们在庙宇里面是一个神圣的地方，所以請不要在这里面喝咖啡啦、喝茶啦哦。那么请不要把这些杯子带进来。We do prepare a lot of water in the in the lobby and very nice cups and very enjoyable. So please enjoy your drink outside and we'll be really appreciate. 所以我们在我们的今天的主办人非常慈悲，他们有准备了很多的水，我们可以在外面享用，尽量不要把这些杯子带进来啊。那么you are responsible for your own carrying items, so do not leave any personal items belonging. And when the session is over, 你们所有我们自己的私人的皮包啦，各种财物都是我们自己的责任啊。所以在离开这个法会的时候呢，请把它一起带走，不要留在现场。因为我们可能没有人在看着，如果搞丢的话呢，那就很不好意思了。谢谢大家。还有 another thing is our car, right? Please pre-register for the whole day's parking in the counter in the reception area, so that you can grant your free parking in the blue zone in the I think it's third floor, right? So this is sorry, fifth floor. So if you got tickets, come to me. If you park in the third floor, fifth floor. 各位师姐跟师兄，如果说是有开车的话，麻烦你在柜台的registration 那边告诉他们你的牌照号码，就可以在5楼免费 parking 一整天啊，可以上网或是直接到下面去都可以。那另外呢，如果说你们如果说是在这个我们今天的法会和明天的法会，我们现场有一群很可爱的义工，因为他们都有一些讨论的一些规则，我们应该来尊重他们，跟他们配合，这就是我们对这个法会最大的尊重。So we have many volunteers here. They have worked out some common understanding for everybody. So please do respect their instruction and then to cooperate with them. We'll be really, really appreciate. So any questions, please contact those volunteers. 如果您有任何的问题的话呢，就请跟这些义工来联系。Another thing, a good news for people who cannot understand English is that we do prepare direct translations. The microphone is in the right-hand side of me, left-hand side of you, in the corner for Helen, and it's free to loan to you. When you finish, please contact them. And do you find something interesting? I should speak in Mandarin, because they probably don't understand me, right? Just joking. 如果说您是讲国语听不懂英文的话，这次呢，我们的主办人非常的有爱心，我们有现场的直译是用国语来讲的。那这些设备呢，跟耳机都在我的右手边 ，Helen 这里哈，跟师姐借一下。但是在今天上课结束之后呢，麻烦请把耳机还给主办单位，非常谢谢您。另外还有一点呢，就是我们知道明天都有会供，对不对？那大家看到前面已经安排了很多漂亮的会供，所以说大家如果要付一个心意来做会供的话，请到前台柜台那边去，我们用donation 的方式来表达我们的心意，这样子的话会比较整齐。We do have a talk tomorrow, and all of the food already being prepared. So if you like to donate your contribution, please contact the front desk. And so that they will collect everything together for our effort. So once again, thank you, Rinpoche, for a very busy schedule and coming here to provide the teaching for us. Thank you, Rinpoche. 谢谢 Rinpoche.
And one more announcement. If you have received the Chakrasambhava empowerment from Rinpoche in Seattle and would need a copy of the practice sadhana, please talk to me during the break. 如果你们在西雅图有接受仁波切的圣乐金刚的灌顶，那需要请那个修行的这个法本的话，请休息时间来找我，谢谢 ，Thank you。
Good morning, people. Page 2.
Especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. All mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly will I establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. All mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly will I establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. And we read the 37 Bodhisattva practices together in English, starting on page 33. Namo Lokeshvaraya. With respectful three doors, I always pay homage to you, Supreme Guru and Guardian Avalokita, who though seeing that all phenomena neither come nor go, strive solely for wayfarer's purpose. The complete Buddha's source of benefit and ease have emerged from having accomplished the true Dharma. Furthermore, since that depends on knowing what actions to take up, the practices of the Buddha's children should be explained. At this time, when the hard-won ship of leisure and fortune has been gained, to listen, ponder, and meditate day and night without neglect, in order to deliver self and others from the ocean of samsara, is the Bodhisattva's practice. Passions for kith and kin are stirred up like water. Aggressions towards enemies blaze like fire. Dark are the delusions of forgetting what to adopt and what to discard. To abandon one's fatherland is the Bodhisattva's practice. When one has abandoned evil lands, afflictions gradually wane. When one is without distraction, virtuous practice waxes on its own. When one is clear-sighted, certainty in Dharma is born. Keeping to solitude is the Bodhisattva's practice. Long-time companions will part from each other. Possessions obtained through effort will be left behind. Consciousness, the guest, will cast aside the guest house of the body. Letting go of this life is the Bodhisattva's practice. When one accompanies base friends, the three poisons increase. The work of hearing, pondering, and meditating gets corrupted, and love and compassion are made absent. To abandon base friends is the Bodhisattva's practice. When one attends a true spiritual friend, faults are consumed and good qualities grow full like the waxing moon. To hold that one even dearer than one's own body is the Bodhisattva's practice. But worldly God himself, also bound in samsara's prison, is able to give protection. When refuge is sought, taking refuge in the undeceiving three jewels is the Bodhisattva's practice. The able one taught that the evil states, miseries, which are extremely hard to bear, are the fruit of wrongdoing. Therefore, never committing misdeeds, even at the cost of life, is the Bodhisattva's practice. Like a dewdrop on a blade of grass, well-being in the three planes of existence perishes in but an instant. Seeking the supreme status of never-changing release is the Bodhisattva's practice. When my mothers, affectionate to me since beginningless time, are in distress, what use is my own well-being? Arousing bodhicitta in order to deliver infinite sentient ones is the Bodhisattva's practice. All ill-being, without exception, has come from wanting for my own welfare. The complete Buddhas have been born from the altruistic mind. Therefore, truly exchanging my pleasure for others' ill-being is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if, driven by great desire, others steal all my wealth or have it stolen, dedicating to them my body, resources, and 3 times virtues is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if others cut off my head when I haven't done the slightest wrong, taking upon myself their misdeeds through the power of compassion is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if some broadcast throughout the billionfold universe all sorts of things to disgrace me, in return to speak of their good qualities with a loving mind is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if some dig out my hidden faults and insult me in the midst of a crowd, to bow respectfully, perceiving them as spiritual friends, is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if a person I've dearly nurtured like my own child should view me as an enemy, to love him even more as a mother does a child stricken with illness is the Bodhisattva's practice. Even if, driven by pride, an equal or inferior being tries to demean me, placing him with respect like a guru at the crown is the Bodhisattva's practice. Though I may lack sustenance, be constantly abused, stricken by grave illness and evil spirits, in return to be undaunted and to take upon myself all wayfarers' misdeeds and ill-being is the Bodhisattva's practice. Though I may be renowned with many bowing to me, and may gain wealth like Vaishravanas, having seen that the glory and riches of existence are meaningless, not to be puffed up with pride is the Bodhisattva's practice. When the enemy of one's own aggression has not been tamed, subduing outer enemies will only make them multiply. Therefore, to conquer one's own continuum with the army of love and compassion is the Bodhisattva's practice. Desirables are like salt water. However much one consumes, it only makes craving increase. Thus, immediately abandoning whatever things produce clinging attachment is the Bodhisattva's practice. The ways things appear are one's own mind. From the beginning, that very mind has been free from elaborated extremes. Knowing just that, not to create in the mind the signs of grasped at and grasping is the Bodhisattva's practice. When encountering pleasing objects, though they appear beautiful like rainbows in summertime, not to view them as real and to abandon clinging attachment is the Bodhisattva's practice. Diverse sufferings are like a child's death in a dream. How exhausting Therefore, when encountering unfavorable conditions, viewing them as delusive is the bodhisattva's practice. If one must give up even one's body when wanting enlightenment, what need is there to mention other material things? To be generous without hope of karmic ripening is the bodhisattva's practice. If lacking discipline, one's own purpose is not yet achieved, wanting to accomplish others' purpose is laughable. Therefore, observing discipline without interest in existence is the bodhisattva's practice. To bodhisattvas who want virtuous wealth and resources, every harm doer equals a precious treasure. Therefore, cultivating patience without animosity for anyone is the bodhisattva's practice. Even heroes and self-made ones who accomplish only their own purpose strive as if putting out fires on their heads. Seeing this, to take up diligence, the source of good qualities, for all wayfarers' sake, is the bodhisattva's practice. Afflictions are completely overcome by calm abiding that has insight. Having understood this, to cultivate concentration that has truly transcended the four formless equilibria is the bodhisattva's practice. Without discerning awareness, one cannot attain complete enlightenment through the other five perfections. Thus, to cultivate, together with method, awareness that does not distinguish the three spheres is the bodhisattva's practice. If one has not examined one's own confusion, one might look like a practitioner but act otherwise. Therefore, continually examining and abandoning one's own confusion is the bodhisattva's practice. If driven by afflictions, one tells of another bodhisattva's faults, oneself gets corrupted. Thus, not expressing the faults of those who have entered the great vehicle is the bodhisattva's practice. Because being driven by gain and respect brings mutual dispute and corrupts the work of hearing, pondering, and meditating, to abandon attachment to the households of close ones and patrons is the bodhisattva's practice. Because harsh words disturb others' minds and corrupt the bodhisattva's conduct, abandoning coarse language unpleasant to others is the bodhisattva's practice. Afflictions once habituated are hard to reverse with antidotes. Thus, having seized the antidotal weapon for the mindful and vigilant person to level afflictions like attachment the moment they first arise is the bodhisattva's practice. In brief, whatever course of action one takes, one should ask, what is the state of my mind? Accomplishing others' purpose through continually being mindful and vigilant is the bodhisattva's practice. In order to dispel infinite wayfarers' ill-being, to dedicate for enlightenment through awareness of the three spheres' purity, the virtues accumulated by having such effort is the bodhisattva's practice. Having followed the speech of the holy ones, the meaning expressed in the sutras, tantras, and treatises, I have written down the 37 practices of bodhisattvas for those who wish to train on the path of the Buddha's children. Due to my inferior intellect and meager study, this is not a composition that will delight the learned. Yet because I have relied on the sutras and the Holy One's speech, I think these bodhisattva practices are not mistaken. However, because it is difficult for one of lesser intelligence like me to fathom the great waves of bodhisattva's conduct, I beseech the Holy Ones to forbear the mass of faults, such as contradictions and disjunctions. By the virtue that have come from this, may all wayfarers become, through excellent, ultimate, and fictional bodhicitta, equal to the guardian Avalokita, who dwells not in the extremes of existence or peace. So yesterday we came to this line on page 33. Through my prayer, may all you beings recognize your intrinsic awareness. What is the distinction between awareness and unawareness? Previously we have said when you recognize it, then you are a Buddha. Not recognizing it, you are a sentient being wandering in samsara. Although there is a single basis of mind. And when you recognize this basic nature of mind, the natural state of mind, that itself is the Buddha. In the Kagyu lineage, it is said beings have not recognized that their own mind is the Buddha. When you recognize the nature of your own mind, your intrinsic awareness, that itself is the Buddha. Whenever you recognize that, you attain enlightenment.
동네시는 옹으로 같이 보는데 그래서 너도 제일 가지고 왔다. 인fin로 인fin로 요 가시려고요. 인fin로 운에요 가리 jakabda yak고는 거 망을 yak고 양고서 로디요. 대웅때 이게 제래. 인fin로 시랍요나들이 나긴 총알에 얘네들이 냠이지 바로 혼자 쥐탁진 혼자로 산책성 거래. 산책성 거라 다다다 해지지 봐. 시바 재미 영화에 다더니 전에 생각서 딱 했더니 이비를 로드를 가려줘. 이비를 로드 때서 지랑 때를 또 마타 차다 주매지 돌아요나 좀 올려서 몇십 번 대해서 보면 차다 주매지 공간 상관이 와도 그래 지금 생도 파디 자지 연구를 해. 내면 자롱라고 차로 해. 서로 딱 깨다도 천이매가 탐지를 도와 탐지를 자나기 통로랑 니도 하마 그런 거 보고 탐지를 자는 송아 가고면도 나중에는 제대로 차. 똑똑히 근데 내가 이런 거를 될 힘주지만 말고 시바 재미 영화에 딱히 따로 보면 힘주지만 말고 해야지.
And so then there's two forms of ignorance. There is the innate unawareness and the imputing unawareness. So it says innate unawareness means unmindfulness and distraction. Imputing unawareness means dualistic thoughts towards self and others. So first, innate unawareness is unmindfulness and distraction. So it is when you do not know how to properly look at your mind, the nature of your mind. You do not, you cannot actually properly see the nature of your mind. So for example, there are some people who say, when you meditate, you might go crazy, so maybe it's better not to meditate. But that is just the fault of not knowing how to actually look at the nature of the mind, how to meditate. And that is mainly due to self-grasping. So for this reason, the preliminary of what we actually need to cultivate before we begin to meditate is bodhicitta. That is what all our lamas, our teachers in any center really tell us. The preliminaries are very important. And so when we look at the preliminaries, people are often overwhelmed and they think about all these numbers that they have to accumulate, 100,000 prostrations and the 100-syllable mantra and so on. And thinking about that, they get tired and they think that it is so difficult to practice their preliminaries. But what is actually the actual preliminary that has to precede all of that before we engage in any practice? It is a wish to benefit others. That is most important. So bodhicitta is the preliminary to all the different Dharma practices. And then on the basis of that, we cultivate bodhicitta where it has not arisen. We have a wish to benefit others, and we contemplate the four thoughts that turn the mind. So here, first we understand what is suffering. We must understand the suffering nature of all sentient beings. And so it is not just now and in our case, our own suffering, but the suffering of all beings. And so it is necessary to recognize that first, because if we do not recognize suffering, if we do not understand what is suffering, we will never find a proper method to eliminate suffering. That is why the Buddha first taught, first you must recognize, you must understand suffering, and then you must abandon the origins of suffering. So it is just like first you need to recognize that you have an illness. If you do not recognize that, you also do not know what kind of medicine, what kind of method you need. Only when you know what illness you have will you know what kind of medicine you should take. Otherwise, if we do not understand that, very quickly we grow tired of all the studying and the practice and the accumulations. So we need to identify a suffering and what causes suffering. And so for that, we need to recognize that it all originates from within the mind. The afflictions and thoughts that arise in our mind are those causes that we need to eliminate. So with our body and our speech, we engage in action that come from a motivation within the mind, a negative state of mind. For example, when we are in a negative state of mind, we say harsh words to someone, or we gossip and so on. So all the non-virtuous actions that we engage in actually come from this negative state of mind. And that ultimately comes from self-grasping. And so therefore the ultimate preliminary that we must first cultivate is an altruistic mind, a bodhicitta. So that in that sense, then the preliminaries are indeed very important. But if we do not see that point, then we may grow tired from being overwhelmed by so many accumulations of the preliminaries. So the actual preliminary, in brief, is the altruistic mind. And if you feel that I do have a wish to benefit others, for example, I want that this country turns out well, I want that the people here experience well-being and so on, that is an altruistic mind. And an altruistic mind is a mind of wisdom. When there's an altruistic mind, self-grasping diminishes. So in whatever practice we do, we need to develop the preliminary of bodhicitta. So innate unawareness means unmindfulness and distraction. It is we are unable to look properly at our mind. We do not know. We are unmindful of our true nature. And so, for example, if you cultivate an altruistic mind, you should investigate that mind, look at that mind, recognize it. What kind of mind is that? For example, if you have a friend that you love, or you have like a cat or a dog and so on, a pet, then just naturally the nature of that is happiness. They want to be around you. They want to stay next to you, because this mind of altruism is a vast mind. Otherwise, if we do not cultivate such a mind, if we are always angry and frustrated, then our mind solidifies more and more like a block of ice, ice of self-grasping. And then we cannot recognize anything. We are unmindful of anything. And then everything is about us. So then everyone appears as an enemy, a threat. Even one's own family and friends, one's parents, one's children, we think that they don't like me, because we cling to a self, we are selfish. So then we don't want to even look at the nature of that, because we are solidified by self-grasping. So that is really the nature of this first kind of ignorance, the innate unawareness. We are unmindful, we do not actually look at our mind.
현재 말하고 싶어 재미가 와요. 그런데 딱봐 말고 나이 있었는데 봐. 라그랑 길에 생을 딱게 따와니 마당. 그런데 따지를 다락을 놓게. 니도 매도 딱게 당기로리. 너 나이 이도 저 공리 말이. 너지 그냥 더 남을 그 사각을 놓쳐타면 뭐 내요. 저는 너 나기 너 근데 딱 말고 나진이 있었는데 말이에요. 전 노르디너다. 나진이 한두고 있다. 그렇지 생긴 같이 망아야. 설에 느끼니 나이 나진이. 다른 거 네발에 자대 네바 많이 받대 말지. 다들 주제랑 좀 나와 나이 딱게 맞당. 모르겠지. 다 왔다는 근데 딱 말고 나이 있었는데 말이에요. 대외지 말과 이제 가지고 걸고 토만 건 지금 다 말이 생기고 있는 처지. 다들 매바라 내만 지네. 다들들이 아들이 초등학교 자롱자로 다 차요. 여덟 용보지 선진 타지 선제 나도 집에 쳤다고요. 말과 이들을 때는 또다가 선지 타지 남편은 자롱자로 차요. 다 자롱 살아 강길이 요래 나는 자롱 요래 자롱 저기 턱닥 요래 도나기 나봐 처용들이 도나기니 모르다를 차동 거예요. 들이지 다투면 다 차로도 도리 상고요. 말과 다인지 건져 잡고 말과 예라더니 다인 렘바리서 자공도 도리 오늘 올라주는 차 보는 것도 같이 아마 비다라 소바게 대지요. 이게 지금 지금 처지 사지 아예 뭐란 게 내가 사지 공부 때나 코르센지 당체에 재미 접으면 봐 쌍지 코르센지 다 감정 거를 재미 접으면 봐 쌍지 sempre 싸워 지야 되죠. 예수 sempre 싸워 지시 라도 sempre 따겠대 sempre 싸워 지라 sempre 싸워 되거든 싸워 란도 sempre 가리 뒤나도 가리졌다 또 하고 이제 싸워래 내가 따겠도 싸워 그러나 비인데 가리다 싸우는 비인데 다 남도 대방가 마음과 맞지 되니 봐잖아 남카랑이 차대요 남카랑이 차대는 남카를 딱지에 떠나 남카를 그냥 니도 해 다창 양도 딱지에 떠 생제도 한 남카도 하고 남카를 니도 다 딱지에 떠나 예를 들니 니스도 뭐시바 당 재미 멤버 재미 접하면 봐도 상나 니스도 뭐시바 당 우리 딱지에 떠나 다 세부 코랑은 이미 하고 그래 야 농부 그런 농부 찍으래 다 설리 때는 이 약간 잡차만 걸어 왔어 작진고 빼게 볼까면 농부 제보지 따지 줘라 약간 참만 깜짝 그랬어 농부 찍으래 따지니와 빼세잖아 작진고 그거 대선 그거 이제니랑 그 샘지 보라 랑 샘지 보라다나 바로 적대다 이제 타라고 풍보라고 그래 내가 주마다고 주인은 그 자식 대신에 우리끼나 대다고 차대요. 체님 힘받도 달라는 줄 알아. 난 샘을 닦게다. 매지 속도를 생도를 닦게다. 생도도 매지 세디시올 소지를 쳤다. 소지를 쳤대는 다 요들 mendoza 자와지고 싸우는 게 똥벌어 싸와지 자 싸똥남 파다 자 남팔 님이와 하고는 오 이스도 시바 당 또 세물에들 님도 하고 이 세우대로 전이 하고 좀 그러면 봐선 이스도 시바 당 이미 장 르과랑오 시바 줘 오, 르과랑고 뭐 르과랑이 싸보는 거다를 해지. 르과랑고 시발 줘서.
So the first form of ignorance, the innate unawareness, means unmindfulness and distraction. And then there is the imputing unawareness. Imputing unawareness means dualistic thoughts towards self and others. So then, since we do not look at our mind, we do not properly investigate, examine the actual nature of our mind, then that unawareness leads to the imputing unawareness, which means we are labeling. For example, we are saying, and this is how it is, or this is not how it is, or it exists or it doesn't exist, or this is me and this is him, this is what it really is, or this is what it really not is. And when we look at the outer universe, we see this world and we think it's always there. It has been there for millions of years. It is there. So the outer universe and the sentient beings are all there. So the imputing unawareness, imputing ignorance, is the dualistic perception of self and other. And so then we perceive countless sentient beings on the outer level and the outer universe. We see everything as a duality separate from us. There is on the outer level the universe, on the inner level we see self and other. Whatever we perceive, we think this is how it is. It is true. So we hold something to be true that actually isn't true. Actually, everything is compounded and therefore impermanent. But if we do not really investigate it and look at it clearly, then it seems to be real. So imputing unawareness means dualistic thoughts towards self and others. And so then when did these two forms of ignorance arise? They always arise since beginningless time. Since beginningless time in samsara they have arisen. And both kinds of unawareness are the basis for the delusion of all beings. So the basis for the delusion of all beings is the holding to be true something that is not really, doesn't exist in that way. And this grasping to a reality becomes more and more solidified, just like ice, water freezing into ice. So actually the nature of all sentient beings' mind is Buddha nature. Buddha nature is like a vast ocean. And due to the two types of ignorance, the mind of sentient beings has become like ice. So ice blocks floating on the ocean that occasionally bump into each other, and that creates conflict. So although ice has the nature of water, they appear just like a stone, like a rock. And if you, although it is water, if you hit somebody over the head with the ice block, then also they will bleed. So then, of course, beings think this is a rock. They say that what actually is ice, they call it a rock. So that is the ignorance. Because it does actually perform the function of a rock. When you hit somebody on the head with ice, they also will bleed. So therefore, they think it is a rock. So that is the ignorant view. And then next it says, through Kunda Sangpo's prayer, may all you beings wandering in samsara clear away the dark fog of unmindfulness, clear away the clinging thoughts of duality. So all the beings wandering in samsara, so here samsara, we understand that as the three realms of samsara. And when it says clear away the dark fog of unmindfulness, is clarify your mind and look at your mind as it is. So the nature of the mind is clarity, actually. And clarity means there is awareness, conscious awareness that recognizes whatever arises in the mind, whatever thought and so on arises in the mind. So what is the nature of this clarity then? When you look at the nature of this clarity that recognizes it, then all thoughts of the past might stop, the future thoughts have not yet arisen, and within that, between the thoughts, it all becomes like space. The mind becomes like space. So when you look at the nature of this clear consciousness, it becomes like space. And then when you investigate space, when you look at that space-like nature, what is the nature of that? How can we draw a line within space? There is no two, no duality in space. So when you understand that there is no two in space, no duality within space, then all dualistic grasping, all unmindfulness, this dark fog of unmindfulness will be cleared away. The clinging thoughts of duality will be cleared away. And then you understand that because the mind is like space, there cannot be a duality within space. For example, it is like one tree. It seems that there is a duality in that tree because it has a root but many branches. But for example, when we are introduced to Mahamudra, it says when you cut the root of the tree, the entire tree withers, it dries out, because it is actually one with many branches. And so likewise, in this way, you should look at your mind. So on the outer level, you see forms, you see bodies, different beings, but they actually are compounds. And because they are compounds, they are impermanent, and in the end, they will become dust, a heap of ashes. So therefore, whatever appears only appears momentarily like an illusion or like a TV show. In the end, after we have died, this body turns into ashes. So then when you investigate when you investigate yourself, what is more important then, the body or the mind? So the mind is actually more important. And in order to understand the mind of all beings, you should look at your own mind. When you look at your own mind, you cannot say that there is something that is really there, that exists, because it is empty. But also it is clear. The nature of clarity is empty. The nature of emptiness is clear. And that is the space-like union of clarity and emptiness. And within space, there is no division, there's no duality. So when you understand that, the clinging thoughts of duality are cleared away. That is when you understand that there is no duality within the mind. That is the actual nature of the mind. And so, therefore, may you recognize your own intrinsic awareness. So this intrinsic awareness, the nature of your innate awareness, your natural awareness, is this space-like nature that is empty and clear.
있어도 시바 당 시바들라 갑장 이제 쪽에 뛰는 바바감이 그래서 류니리 상고요래 류는 일이 당을 근데 말 생적이나 류니리 상고요래 그냥 이제 뛰는 바바가도 상고다가 이 자원이 말이지 거래 류는 용왕강하고 그 성천아 용왕까지 가서나 4,000명 용왕가지 즉 맞아 요 말이야 류라 니마 저 말이지 내가 차도도 있나 또 차도도 있는 맹당 치마가 가가지 류라 가가 말이지 이제 쭉 하고도 저는 나왔더니 연구를 이 때문에 샘 남카를 뛰는 파도래 그리고 샘 남카리 남카를 님이요 양자한테 다 끼잖아 님은 독선에 대해서 하고는 딱 과장 거 차례 하장 같이 버리 대회 니 매나라는 걸 빠사오대 다른 지역을 빠사오대 님도 하고는 좀 짧게 좀 말해 봤더니 사그요 다톡 차지 공방이야 이제 상나더니 이스메 그 시디 제디 생긴 나가다 차요 나가 님이요 하고는 다톡 차지 간이야 제베들 야도로야 요 말이 다다 생모 중대 통나데 독도로야 말이 저 말에 제베들 강송나더니 노진 장진 저 안에 봐 선택적인 체치용 이래
So clear away the clinging thoughts of duality. Also yesterday we mentioned this single basis. So we tried to understand the single basis, because one might think that there's a single basis of mind, but there is a duality in bodies. For example, in forms, there's two or more bodies. But yesterday when we talked about the single basis of all, then on the outer level too, then we actually have resolved that there are not even two bodies. There is no duality in physical forms either. So that is because we have said the body, our body, consists of the 5 elements, and wherever you go in the material world, everything consists of that: earth, water, fire, wind, and space. There is no material thing that doesn't consist of the 5 elements. So it all consists of the same matter. And therefore, there's also no duality in the physical form, in the body. So we actually are not separate in the body either. There's a single basis of the body. And for this reason, it is only temporarily different names that we label different shapes of the same thing, different like heaps of earth and so on. We give it different names, but in reality, there's no real distinction in material form either. It has a single basis. So then we have also resolved that within the mind there is no duality, because the mind is like space. So when you look at the mind, the first thing that you should understand is that there is no division within space. So there is no duality. There can be no duality in space. And then when you understand that, then within that state of non-duality, you should recognize the clear awareness that this nature is. And when you recognize that, all doubts and ignorance, unawareness will be cleared away. And so when you ultimately attain the state of enlightenment, then all dualistic perception is completely cleared away, and non-dual primordial wisdom expands, like the sky. And within the sky, there is no duality. So the nature is always the same. When you attain enlightenment, it has not gotten any better. And now, right now, when you only glimpse it for one moment, it is still the same. It is not any worse. It is exactly the same. And therefore we call it Vajradhara. It has an unchanging nature. That is the characteristic or the special quality of our own mind, of Buddha nature.
대회나 다들 바람고 시나 바람고 시는 이미 와 하고 송 바람고 마시나 다 니디로 대청대 다 대청대도 목도 봐 되게 되는 쪼지 내로 마도 바까는 대청대로 봐야지 그 요리데 얘는 가서 가리나 당이 입지게 넘버 10번들이 나 인디로는 대통대 신바 참지 말아야 변은 다당소 작한번 통해요. 아니 니시보도 지이와체도 요래. 다디라 좀 됐지 다 다당 노용아 인디로는 대통대 신바 참지 말아야 나 신바 참모도 양생양도 쏘는데 신바 참모도 레와 참모도 도차 도바 차고도 도바 차지 다이 야라 과찬데 차장이 차요 차장이 중요만 맞춰도 좀 그래 와 차도 오른지대 차장이도 도와만 뭐지 싸우잖아 이 다진지 단도 다진이 차들 나라면 차리 직장이요 말 보통상 그 소리 좀 주고 너한테 들리는 얘기만 있죠. 세놓고 내다 돈도 용마다 사면이 용 척도 그 농성 다들 책다다 그래. 당고 세르디 딱지다만 고사고요. 신문도 이 좋을 때는 자고 이 같이 참고도 딱지 처음으로 딱지 한 거요.
And so then it says, dualistic thoughts create doubt. Then not recognizing one's own intrinsic awareness, when we do not recognize non-duality, then a dualistic mind creates doubts. And of the 7 forms of ignorance, doubt is the principal one, the ultimate form of ignorance. So when we, in the context of not looking at the nature of our mind, sometimes a doubtful mind can be of some help. But what the doubtful mind does is it divides between good and bad. It investigates and then it labels it as good, anything as good and bad. So it is this discriminating consciousness that discriminates the different aspects of objects. So this is what a dualistic mind does. It creates doubts. And it begins with it comes from a very subtle a clinging thought, and that creates the doubt. For example, when we just want to drink a cup of tea, then the doubtful mind in its subtle form of clinging, it labels that either as delicious or not tasting very good, not delicious. And it does the same thing for any of the 5 sense pleasures. It divides between good and bad. It labels. And as we mentioned previously, the subtle form of clinging or subtle form of attachment is hope, and the subtle form of clinging. And then the subtle form of aggression or hatred is the fear. And then these develop into coarse attachment and aversion, and not recognizing the fault in these afflictions is ignorance. And so then it says, from subtle attachment to this dualistic turn of mind, dualistic tendencies become stronger and thicker. So then we keep we habituate to these thoughts, we cling to these thoughts of attachment and aversion, self and others. And then we are attached to ourselves, and actually there is no being, there's no being that is not attached to themselves. Animals, for example, cherish their own life the most because they have a perception of a self, and therefore they are afraid. And so then it says food, wealth, clothes, home, and friends, 5 objects of the senses and your beloved family. All these things cause torment by creating longing and desire. So these words are quite clear. So in order to understand how from this subtle attachment of this dualistic mind, the tendencies become stronger and thicker, we investigate that, we understand that by looking at an easy example. For example, thinking about food, we can understand how we label that and divide between good tasting and bad tasting. Or we divide our perception of friends, of companions, other people. We call them good or bad and so on. So that is what the doubtful mind does. When you do not look at your mind directly, then the doubtful mind is dualistic and divides, investigates people in this dualistic, divisive way.
용 착배도 배동 대다 적대는 출발돼서 아대 이도 열 착과데 뭐도 왜 타바세 뭐요 오때 대화했지 이 대화들 사지 때는 저 삭제 잠시 등에 저 삭제 그 대화들 삭제 다다 대화를 두다 등에는 좀 요래들 그래서 대다 적대는 출발돼 저 이동 열 이성장은 다시 쭉 가리죠. 첫딱지 땅거리. 그래서 가라 쪽으로 차잖아요. 딱 같이 장로 가고 장로 가고 타만 걸어 가고. 가나 라왕 거고요. 당가 라왕 쪽으로 타만 고 지는 나온 거지. 이제 망고요. 그 실험 매도 타바다 어떻게 가리죠. 로는 무슨 하정 공부하고. 나도 쪼대는 물을 못 지. 하정 공부가 물을 졸았다면 중이 뭐는 졸랑 들어왔다고 자로 그 말치래. 오 초대 지 내와 인상 초대 등을 줘야 돼. 다른 출발해. 초대 내와 저 초대도 와서 저人초 내와 오나 전 출발하고 말이 사지. 오 조만 저 내와 토론 그래. 말이 좀이 내와 총총지 또 능에 용요 대대 출발해다 직진 출발해 얘는 누용아지라 락 이동아 지지선장 세그딱 그래 차이잖아 딱 또로 하던 아치 모두 뛰고 요 생은 요즘 가지 다 대조를 너희만 거리고라 다치 잡고 될 세나요 이는 때 두고 말이 샘도 제가 남대요라 남은 청물에 그 누가요 같이 생 시설로 찍잖아 다시 못해 생물 중을 봐도 남시가 되게 담네요 잘아들 알면은 담도 천도 쓰니까 이게 차름도 잘하고 뭐 당신이 차요 누군가고 이렇게 담는 거요 여기들이 거기서 전들이 담는 철을 조직은 탄고 찍은 거래 담는 거요 라만하고 그래 안 출발해 그다지 긴 출발해 religion the same time or zumbi the same time 이렇게 중대한 것이 있냐도 능한 세적으로 차죠 장난 타마 차죠 도로적으로 차죠 하자 자치고 차죠 다 평행도 넣고도 상관없어 문일에 사실 가시는 좀다 있어만 한 거지 그래서 도로 조금 거리대 다 있어만 한 거지 무슨 잡아를 잘라 하자 자치고 너무 좋아돼 좀 능해요 그렇지 그봐요면 내봐요 또 내가 하나 탔는데 그거 내가 지네 사실 싫어봤더니 누군가 대다고 차 영묘를
So it says these things cause torment by creating longing and desire. These are all worldly delusions. So now we are attached to something that an object that we find pleasing, that we like, and we think that we actually need those things, because we think that when we have those things, they will bring us pleasure, they will make us happy. But the Buddha actually said that everything contaminated has the nature of suffering. So this samsaric happiness and pleasure appears to be pleasurable now, but in the end it turns into suffering. And that is why we call it a worldly delusion. So we should investigate on the fault that happens when we become attached and pursue these objects of our desire. For example, when we pursue objects like food or drinking alcohol, or some people like to smoke, or even take drugs and so on. And for example, the people say then, I like to do that, I like to drink, I like to smoke, it's my choice, I have the freedom to do whatever I wish. I need that freedom to do whatever I wish. I need that freedom to smoke if I wish. So many people say that, but then they do not really investigate that with some intelligence. So what actually happens then when we smoke, for example? Of the 6 realms of samsara, we become the most severe ignorant. And that is because we are spoiling, we are wasting away our precious human body that possesses those 18 freedoms and fortunes. And then we might look like a human, but really act like an animal. So you think that it will bring you pleasure or happiness, but actually it is the cause of suffering. And therefore, it is a worldly delusion. If it would actually bring you happiness, real joy, real happiness, then nobody would call that a worldly delusion. So the Buddha doesn't call a delusion what is actually happiness. If it really brings you happiness, then there is nothing wrong with it. But it doesn't really bring you happiness. It is a temporary small pleasure that actually leads to great suffering later on. And that is why the Buddha calls that a worldly delusion. And so the same is true then for the other 5 sense pleasures. For example, food and clothing and so on. For example, clothing, one might be very attached to a nice dress, and one really wants that, and one thinks it is very special. And then one is very careful with this dress, and one doesn't want to give it to anyone. One is very stingy with that dress. And so that actually creates a lot of suffering. It binds the mind. It keeps the mind in fetters, in bondage. And so that is what is harming you. And later when you die, some people, they still die with an attachment to their precious objects. So they die with this mind that is bound by these objects. And then the Bardo consciousness is still bound by the attachment to these objects. And although the object is not here anymore, the consciousness strives towards these objects in this and future lives. And so it is the same for all the 5 sense pleasures. They bind the mind of samsaric sentient beings, which is why they are deluded or confused. Confusion here means that they have lost their freedom. They are controlled by their worldly delusions. And so therefore then it says, these are all worldly delusions. The activities of grasping and clinging are endless. So we really have to investigate the faults and the qualities of all these sense objects. For example, food, clothing, alcohol, smoking, and so on. Is it actually of any benefit, or is it harmful? It is something that we should really investigate. And the Buddha also said you should not fall into both extremes. Of course, we need food. We need to eat food to sustain our body. We also need clothes. But that is why, for example, the monks are being told not to wear many precious objects or clothing and so on, because it actually doesn't help anything. It doesn't benefit them really. It causes great harm. If it would actually be of benefit, if it would really bring lasting happiness, then there would be nothing wrong with it. So the Buddha, with his wisdom, therefore recognized the attachment to those sense pleasures as worldly delusions, and the activities of grasping and clinging at them are endless.
좀 뱀피처를 때는 먼저 제거를 매인 거를 이렇게 해봤는데 제가 싸놓다가 다다다 심막 강을 심막 총총지도 어떻게 중을 내 체를 다 나타제다 이런 거를 연락 나무실라 저리 나사요 거를 제가 그거 나무시 오래 산도에서 파야 싸우려 말라 싫어하구나 처음에 다 싸우려 그제서 다 중도용이 각각 앉았다고 양털을 용이 가린다고 싫어하구나 말은 좀 가린다고 싸워 하고 이니 나부치도 빈타고요 에티고
So these are worldly delusions. The activities of grasping and clinging to these 5 objects are endless. So the activities of grasping and clinging. So first there is an attachment to an object. And then once we become attached to an object, we begin to cling to this object. And if we cling, then it will lead to suffering as a result. And then as a result of that, one is born as a hungry spirit, a hungry ghost. When the fruition of attachment ripens, you are born as a hungry ghost, tormented by coveting and desiring, miserable, starving, and thirsty. So actually not even as a hungry ghost, but even in this life already it creates a lot of suffering. For human beings, really, what is the greatest difficulty, the greatest problem that they have? It is the interpersonal problem between companions, especially loving relations. And that causes the greatest torment to humans. And so in general, this love is a good quality. But then what happens is that this love also is mixed with selfishness, and so it becomes a great fault, therefore. When love is mixed with selfishness, a self-grasping mind, then it turns into jealousy. The love is too strong, so our attachment is too strong, so we become jealous, and in the end, we separate from our companions. So first, there is love, but then that turns into jealousy, and the jealousy turns into resentment. And then the other partner, the companion, doesn't want to stay with you, and people separate. And that happens anywhere. It happens between partners, it happens between friends, or between disciples and lamas. For example, we say, this is my friend, or this is my lama, and so on. We own them, we try to possess them. Or this is my sponsor, between teachers and so on. So we become jealous when somebody else talks like to one that we consider ours. So jealousy arises, and then that the nature of this jealousy actually is resentment. It is considering oneself to be most important. One's own happiness is most important. And if that is in your mind, if your own happiness is most important, and you're resentful and jealous, even if you do not say anything, if you keep that in your mind, the other person will feel that, and then naturally will not want to stay next to you. So the love then turns into anger, and people separate. So ultimately, that is the fault of self-grasping. So it is actual love, but it is defiled with selfishness. So how does a pure love then look like? For example, if you have a loving friend, or a lama, and so on, any kind of companion, then you would think, I love this other person, and I want him to be happy. I want him to be well. And for as long as he is well, it is fine. If you think in this way, your mind will become relaxed. And then you don't worry about what he's doing. He can do whatever he wants, whatever makes him happy. And then also that will make the other person's mind be relaxed. And so such people can then spend their entire life together. So when there is true altruism, a wish to benefit the other, then people can really stay together for the rest of their life. So even in a worldly sense, actually, if people hold this commitment and stay together until they die, actually that is the love that we talk about in the Dharma. That is actually Dharma. And so then also through this bodhicitta, they will become companions and friends in future lives. But even somebody who doesn't understand the qualities of bodhicitta, only the quality of love itself already leads to better rebirth. For example, there are birds that do not hurt others and that are kind to one another. So that is the quality of even the slightest love. So if that is not present, then we even encounter difficulties already in this life. People separate from each other, and they cling, and after they pass from this life, they are born as a hungry ghost. So the more we cling, the more narrow and small our mind becomes. And so it gradually evolves. So first we are attached, we love and we are attached, and then it turns into jealousy and stinginess. We take ownership, and then it turns into resentment. And so this then leads to the birth as a hungry ghost. And so then, talking about hungry ghosts, people might wonder, do they really exist? Actually, we can see them right here, how they exist. For example, if you put a little bit of food here, then very small, like flies and little animals will come. You can hardly see them. They're very tiny, and they will circle around the food. Why? Because they're hungry. They're blazing with hunger, but they cannot really get the food. They just circle around the food, but they can't really get it. And then after one day, again, they die. So it is like a hell realm or a hungry ghost realm. So some people do not really believe in those hungry ghost and hell realms. But if you really look close, carefully, you can actually see them around us too. And so, so what can we do for that not to happen, not to be born as a hungry ghost? We must cultivate a pure love. And so if we cultivate pure love that is undefiled by selfishness, it will already create happiness in this life and also plants the seed of liberation for future lives. Otherwise, in this life, we become jealous, and out of jealousy and attachment, we engage in various negative actions. For example, we steal from others, we engage in sexual misconduct, various actions of body and speech, and we separate from our friends in this life. We end up having no money, having no house, and so on. So karma already begins to ripen now. So in the different explanations, there are 4 ways in which karma ripens. In different ways, karma ripens, but it can already ripen right now. So therefore, it is important to recognize when the subtle form arises. So when the subtle thought of this clinging attachment arises, you should recognize that here is this attachment, clinging arising. I have to be careful. If I do not let it go now, it will turn into a greater attachment. For example, it begins very small. For example, you like to eat sweet things. But then when that develops and you give way to it, it can turn into diabetes. So you want to eat it because it tastes nice, but because you also possess wisdom, you let it be and you do not eat it. Those without wisdom will just eat it. So it is very important for our Dharma practice to always clearly discern between the qualities and the faults of those things that we are doing.
어때도 유나 초미나 초복감이 늘 가르치려다는 밤에 상황을 줘봐. 그래서 산책에 나와요. 주 그치는 지난 벽에 손을 주 남도랑 살 도는 거와 빵 그치. 그래도 유나 살 도는 거니 누가 매세 창게. 가리상 통나한테 시밤이 있잖아니. 말하리 밖에 총코를 시밤이 그런게 총코 인성. 시밤께 맞게든 인성으로 녹차 힘바 철마는 따와라지네. 힘바도 니바 비누 딱지였다니 시라고 놓거든요. 니바도 그 막시에다 시랍진 상태 놓고요. 막시가 샤사고요. 말이 근데 그거라면 배 잡고요. 시리고 같은데 잡고요. 그래서 제한테 동사대 핀컬이 그것도 시바도 이제 봐라. 답이 저렇게 되는 도래. 그래 직접 못했잖아. 누구한테 하고 요래다. 못했는데 누구한테 상도도 놓고요. 내가 수능 최종으로 성기 탐색도 사지에 덮어쳐야 되는 게 탐색도 동발로 써놓았다는 거는 대략적인 수능 상도는 저가 덮고요. 야, 못했는데 조금 초딩을 써놓았다가 이렇게 와서만 소리를 덮어가면 소리 용지 소리서 피우다고 그래서 또 이시 토바를 줬어.
So then it says, through Gunto Sampo's prayer, may all you desirous and lustful beings who have attachments neither reject longing desires nor accept attachment to desires. So neither reject nor accept is that if there is mindfulness, recognition, then one does not have to reject the sense objects. One can enjoy them. But one must clearly see whether or not a clinging attachment arises. And one must investigate and think about the benefit and the fault of enjoying this sense object. And so then if now somebody with wisdom recognizes that there could be a harm, for example, if one eats sweet, it can cause illness, then with a wisdom mind, one would refrain from eating that, for example. So on the relative level, one gives up attachment, clinging attachment, by investigating the faults and the qualities of enjoying a given sense object. And from the ultimate perspective, when one has recognized the nature of mind, intrinsic awareness, and then the moment attachment arises, clinging attachment arises, one recognizes it. There is mindfulness, awareness. And from that perspective, then it is okay to enjoy any of the 5 sense pleasures. But from that perspective also, there is no attachment at all. That is, if the object is present, it is fine. But if it is not present, it is also just as fine. So whatever is there, whatever appears, whatever is there, that is sufficient. Nothing else is needed. So when Milarepa taught the view, meditation, and conduct, that is the conduct that need to be applied. Whatever is there, it is sufficient. And if things are not there, it is also just as fine. So then whatever is there will not harm one, affect one in any way. That is the ultimate conduct of the Vajrayana. Also the omniscient Longchen Rabcham had said, when thoughts settle into the natural state, then there is no need to abandon samsara. So if thoughts have dissolved, then there is no harm in partaking of or enjoying any of the sense pleasures, because then there is no clinging to them. Or Milarepa had said, if there is no clinging, then eating food, for example, becomes a feast offering, a Gana Chakram. So then there is no attachment. So the point is that there is no attachment, and then there is no need to reject. So then let your consciousness relax in its own natural state. then your awareness will be able to hold its own. May you achieve the wisdom of perfect discernment. So this perfect discernment is to investigate, to not allow the mind to become attached. So ideally, from the highest perspective, only through the view, through sustaining mindfulness, one does not become attached. Secondly, one investigates with discerning awareness the benefits and the faults caused by enjoying a given sense object. So, for example, many people that possess wisdom, for example, do not eat meat. They're very careful in their activities. So if we possess wisdom, then we also have an ability to be very, to apply some discernment in all our activities and be heedful in whatever we do. And in that way, we eliminate clinging attachment. So even in this life, in a worldly sense, for example, if one doesn't eat meat because it harms one's physical health, already it is a great benefit. It is also wisdom because we know it harms our body, it harms our health. That is why we don't do it. And that is also a great benefit. But then if we do it for all sentient beings, if we take a vow or like a samaya and do that, for example, and we don't eat meat for the benefit of all sentient beings, then the merit is incredible. If we eat, for example, if we are careful for health reasons, then it is still beneficial. Then at least we will obtain the qualities of birth in the higher realms in future lifetimes. So that is this the wisdom of perfect discernment.
마리바 소소들 여기 차요 차와서 집에 시대를 소소도 보이시 있어. 인디야 랑도 주고 시락들 텔라 시에요네 어떤 시대 대다를
And then, so this wisdom of perfect discernment, as it is called here, is also called often the discriminating or individually discriminating wisdom that has the nature of purified attachment. So that is when you abide within the actual nature of intrinsic awareness, then all the afflictions become liberated as wisdom. And so attachment, the clinging attachment, becomes liberated into this discriminating wisdom, the wisdom of perfect discernment. And so this wisdom of perfect discernment can discriminate clearly, very accurately between faults and qualities. So it knows the very subtle workings of karma, cause and effect. It is the wisdom that knows what to do and what not to do. So the 84,000 afflictions are destroyed only by this one awareness. It is just like an apocalyptic fire, great fire that incinerates everything that appears and exists. And so it can overcome anything. So this awareness has the power to overcome and destroy all afflictions and turn them into primordial wisdom.
마땅히 빠른 촉박들이 다 주력 빠른 촉박들이 작가는 촉박하기 되는 연구들이 아무 나지 나를 차 이 이해는 나 찍고야 고 차서 이 가리 종성 때려지니 단지 박차 차오들 때지 나만 박차 때 빠른 단지 수사 빠지 있어.
And then it says, when external objects appear, the subtle consciousness of fear will arise. So that is then it turning into so this subtle consciousness of fear then slowly turns into this powerful anger. So, for example, it begins in a very subtle way, a subtle consciousness. So, for example, you see a mosquito flying around. And then the moment you see it, it is very small, but you're afraid because you think it will bite you, and then you will hurt, it will itch. So you follow it, you see where does it go. You have an aversion to it, and that is the subtle form of resentment, and that arises anywhere. For example, we don't like a particular kind of food, and that becomes stronger and stronger. So from this fear, the habit of anger becomes stronger and stronger. And then it leads to conflict, fighting between people, between religions, between countries. All conflict actually comes from this subtle consciousness of fear. And that comes from an attachment to oneself and an aversion against others. One only cares for one's own well-being and has little concern for what happens to others. And so this imprint, this habit becomes stronger and stronger. It starts as a subtle habit, but then it turns into the strong habit of anger.
네, 차가 문제도 같이 모르고 이 시당 차가래서 문제도 대 양상 어디 전에 최고 차는 거를 최고 차고 다지 시당은 레버시고 레버로 써먹은 거를 시당도 못 강는 거를 시당도 꼭 알아 그러면서 알이 맞으면 유목직장 요 말이야. 나한테 빼는 파마다 뻐거지가 발라 상태들이 마당 버거지 시죠. 버티 말았지와 마디 벌었지와 요거래. 뒤에 시대 형태니 나디는 라요 거래. 당대. 파마가 써는 왜 버거지 집에 지와니. 버거지 칸이 거도. 코랑 그 레요래. 콩 레조 와서 요거래. 라요 버거 코도 버리지. 코도 집에 지워서 토탕을 그저 나를 딱 보자 그러면 아니야 땅 가봐 톡 세상 그 짜와더니 오늘 그래 내가 뛰니 그거 그 파마가 동바를 뛰나 코로 세상을 했더니 셔드집에 제어 포모지가 성부라고 차야 돼요. 셔드집에 제어 포모 코로 랑서 동바를 따두고 그래 차야 돼요. 라이 세상 코는 라이냐 말이야. 야가 서쪽에 조고요면 야가 조제 성무체당을 했지. 미송다와 시당이 소라바다 로바 공원들만 알고. 얘는 그거 그때나 파마가 동바되는 파마 돈으로도 매. 동바를 따도 매. 파마는 뭐들 안 가면서 그 빈주기가 되지. 나 저거 파마가 집게 제체 남지 나가 초라를 했지. 제와 제대 고소를 여러분. 나 저도 로지 발라야 돼. 나 더 차도지. 나 콩가를 가가면서 나 가가면서 들이 비질 때기는 들이 진제외의 칼이 마치 내가 나 참석 줘봐. 놀러 주는 데와요 말이. 낭축도는 뭐 상속고 가리는 낭동에 들이 조금부터 라시 작용을 시당 중을 차도 중을 했지. 독시발이 뭐 독되는 거지. 나 신을 가르쳐요. 난 레버들라 님들이는 남민 레버 이제 되는 거예요. 남민 그 레버 계단을 아시냐라 그래. 계단 나가 아시고 적용 그래. 계단 아시 가리. 나 참아 자리 성능한 그 보통 총맞게 받았는데 자가 나와는 사이 시리 다지 나와 자지 건다. 강수는 나와 정말 잘 나와 잘한지 대인 레벨에 되는 다냐만 조색 독은 가지. 제가 주원 펀패트 냐 조색 독은 가지. 남이근 레벨 냐라. 얘는 남이디 양 레벨에 종제가 매비요 말이 레벨 종제가 이니 다 같이 매열레 지와라나. 왕근 레벨 라왕 자완이 요만 세당지 왕근 레벨 나벨은 가는 촉과잖아 농가제 제로. 인증 민증 레벨은 이런 촉과 메시지 작업을 지와라나. 메시지는 촉과 작업을 되고. 다다다 같이 라왕 봐. 다 잡아 촉과는 쇼크를 레그 대응 레그 지선 라왕 봐. 랑 세비오라다. 얘도 남 왕근 레벨 라왕 봐지 레지 제살라 랩로로리. 남인지 레벨 진투인지 레벨 세바 진투 파스티는 놓았다는 거요. 용화 좀 다 철마다 그 요리다. 랑 다시 된 걸었고 대사지 소소진이가 레근데 발라더니 다들 지우시 번제거든. 다시 파소 적게 번제거든. 양자 다 되는 촉과자 다만 망고세 되잖아. 왜내 당매 봐면 이 멋지 지와 세람 망고라 다시 마속는 걸었고 다 되는 거를 되네. 그래서 남인전 되게 좀 주인전 되게 좀 되게 세바 좀 용화 좀 이. 주세 번째부터 망대더니 매도 소원을 좀 편도를 제대로부터 잡으려면 탐쪽 역사 탐지 때는 내 강글이 또 hingi lunga te shata hingi jegri jokari jo shedang is chador is galni je dadi je so si jula ta shedang do ta shedang do si ta ta nga me yen de wo to kwa me sa ja khap sang bo de yo ma wa nga shedang ja ji le yo ya lo sang shedang yi ba shi de shedang de ka to ko yo le da ni kong lo do na bi ko ni 당홍이 송송제 등에 랍 대로 제리 제제 랍 되네 관리 저대 광을 쳐 저대 문제를 쳐 그렇지 사지가 됐어 뭐요리 미쳐 보여라도 안게 대신은 오 유머 받지 좀도 신내지 랑 처음 끼마사도 오 잡아서 놓고 하마 신네 빨랑 그 처음 잡아도는 당문이 잡아도 당시 참아 잡았다고 그러지 잡고 있는 관자다 하고도 나는 이 유머 같은 거 잡고 요리 좀 체슈의 시간을 유머 공부 요새 싸우는 상신도 상하관계니 시장지 용증벌 저요 다다 동행이라니 담을 동행 가사가 되는 공동 주공부 동행에서 또 차다 세날의 중화를 탑도 동행에서 시장을 차도를 성화를 이도 유머 중증 문제 제일 아주 다는 나가면 이 동적 기초로 그래.
And so it is really important to recognize when these thoughts arise in their very subtle form. For example, when very subtle anger, aggression arises in the mind. Because if you do not recognize it, it grows stronger and stronger. So recognizing it, then you should think about the results that it leads to. If this resentment and anger stays in your mind, how does this karma ripen? So what is the nature of it? So when, for example, when we get angry, nothing agrees with us. We think that they are not being, it doesn't agree with me. They're not being nice to me. So it all comes from the I. There's actually no affliction which does not arise from the I. For example, the relationship between parents and their children. So the parents and children should have love for one another. So they should see each other with love. And so then, however, due to self-grasping, they lose this perception of love for one another. And then, for example, the parents think, I'm caring, have cared so much for this child, but it doesn't listen. But actually, the child also has its own karma, and we cannot actually have much control over that. And then the child thinks, well, I'm their child and I have the right that they care for me. They must take care of me, but they're not taking properly care of me. So then the child gets angry, and so then they fight and they do not get along. They are angry with each other. Or for example, if like there's a very beautiful girl, if the girl gets very angry, then she turns like into like a monster, and nobody wants to look at her face. Or the parents get very angry, then the children don't want to stay close to them, don't want to look at their face. So that is the nature of hatred. The nature of hatred itself is hellish. So nobody has made hell, but hatred is resentment. Naturally, is the seed for the hell realm. So therefore, Milarepa said, and the root of the lower realms is hatred. Therefore, practice patience, even at the cost of your life. So, for example, the conflict between parents and their child, when the parents are always angry with their child, then the child doesn't want to be close to them. They don't even want to look at their parents' face. But then the parents think, well, my child doesn't love me. And then all the care that the parents have given to their child is all spoiled. All their love has transformed into anger. And so that goes for any relation, for example, between partners, friends. Their love turns into jealousy. And then we think, because we're jealous, we think that he doesn't love me, he doesn't like me. So then we should think about what happens when we let that go by and we get angry and jealous. For example, then we spend our entire life, even in this life, fighting. And even if we are rich and have many possessions, it will not give us any happiness. For example, if you come to a very rich family that actually suffer much on the inside, even though they are very rich, because they are not harmonious with each other, often they even commit suicide. So all of that is the fault of jealousy and anger. That is why we call the afflictions poison. So it is important to understand that. And so we have mentioned that each karma ripens in 4 different ways. For example, in the context of hatred or anger, the first way it ripens is the result of full maturation. That is, the nature of hatred, of this aggressive mind, is hell. So therefore, it naturally creates the hell realm. And what is the nature of hell? The nature of hell is that everything appears as a threat, an enemy. And that is basically the perception that we bring from this life to the next. So in this life, we perceive even our children and husband and wife, our family, as an enemy. So if everything appears as an enemy, a threat to us in this life, then after we die, everything will continue to appear as an enemy or a threat also beyond this life. And that is what this kind of perception is what creates the hell realm. So it says, finally, hostility comes causing violence and murder. When the fruition of this anger ripens, you will suffer in hell by boiling and burning. So then, coming back to the 4 results, first there is the full maturation. So full maturation of hatred is to be born in the hell realm. Then secondly, when that comes to an end, if there is some slight virtue left, then we might be born in the human world again. And then the second result that comes into effect is called the dominating result. And that means we are born in a certain environment in this world without any control over it. And so as a result of hatred, the dominating result will be to be born in a war zone, in a war country in this world, for example. And sometimes even if we are not born in a war country, some people enter a war country driven by the force of their karma. For example, some people are not born in a war country, but nowadays, for example, they enter like terrorist groups, and then they go there, and then they are killed there. So in a way, they are really killing themselves. They are driven by the force of their karma to go to the certain place. And so in a way, without much control, they end up there. And so that also is the dominating result, the second one. And then the third result is the result that is similar to the cause. which means, again, then once we're born in this war zone, again, we will engage in similar actions. So again, we will kill others, we will hurt others. So that is the activity similar to the cause. And then there is the experience similar to the cause. Again, when we kill others, again, we will be killed. So it goes in circles like a wheel. So that's the third result. And then the fourth result is called the proliferating result. And that means that as we continue to kill and be killed, there we create an endless proliferation of karma. So one karma multiplies more and more. It is just like from one flower, countless seeds emerge. So it becomes more and more. And so, for example, when we look at a war-torn country in this world, what is the karma of that? So we feel great compassion for them. We feel that they're so poor in this country. But what is the cause of that? It comes down to hatred and jealousy. And that comes from self-grasping. So even in the human world, we are born in such a place as a result of self-grasping. And so now when we look inside our own mind, even though I am not born in such a place, but if I have these tendencies of hatred and anger and aggression in my own mind, then for sure in the future, 100% for sure, I will be also born in such a place, because that is the nature of aggression. It is the seed for hellish abodes. And knowing that, then you will be able to let go of this negative thought. So it is really important, therefore, to understand the suffering of the three lower realms that we learn in the four thoughts that turn the mind. And the Buddha therefore taught we think about the suffering of the lower realms in order to be able to recognize the causes that lead to such a birth. So the four thoughts, the preliminaries, are really and indeed very important. We must recognize the faults in our afflictions the moment they arise. So, for example, we know their danger, and therefore we are able to recognize them. So, for example, nowadays we are aware of certain dangers like caused by terrorists and so on. So, therefore, we are more careful because we know the danger involved. And in the same way, we must recognize the danger of our own afflictions, the worst of which is hatred, aggression. The worst of the 84,000 different affliction is hatred or aggression. And especially according to the Bodhisattva and the Vajrayana vehicle, hatred really is the greatest fault. And we can see that this is really what causes the greatest suffering in this world. So in general, the suffering of poverty, hunger, and thirst is caused by greed, stinginess, desire. But the suffering of fighting and killing, really hurtful suffering, is all caused by jealousy and hatred. And so it is very important to recognize that and then to look at your own mind to see whether or not these tendencies are present in my own mind and to eliminate them.
Shedang lama tade, shedang nyamde, de shedang rezi, shibki shiba nyamde yore. Eju kaka mare. Oh, dandi shokchi wajige, shiba di nyamne, oh, nga to ochi, tere namsang shedang ki, wangdi shodo yore. Nyamni chenye de shedang ki chung mame hakodo. Shiba rangso sinye, shedang langsung yo, shedang nangda tari, jenshi teke, pa seji nangwe, shedang ki chung shin rang yi me ba. 라니가 초당 납진데 미로요 시바랑 소선데 난고도 좀 거랑 시바 살라메 라르그서 티에리 시바랑 소선데 서비스 토바초 오 시달로도 확받을 생각도 시랑랑 이제 화장실 검사하고 차더니 다 시랑들이 펜종 다 가지가게 유목지는 말이 좋다 다 유목지거든 유목지를 빼시고도 다 유목 같이 끼나 yap고 동아도 저쪽 장소에서 녹아가지고 저쪽은 걸었으면 유목을 안 지시잖아 동아도 저쪽 장소에 저쪽 시바지 독라 독민 쪽으로 어떤 것도 나를 색깔은 지르지 지르 독지 못해서 세트도 독지 뭐지 얘는 좋아진 민근 초도 봐 이제 민들 통나 자체가 상태야 노노로리 또 그런 뭐지 또지 하나 되겠다 이건 자체가 더 양이 선을 지서로 바로 드리는 거 보여래 내가 그런 기도하는 거 봐래 내가 그러니 내는 낭동 담게 된 말라 담게 된 말이 도저히 파는 거 빼야래 뭐 저기 파식 도저는 확실히 저게 라키요 말이 남것도 좀 못해요 나도 뭐 강가장 찰라 그거 말이 파도로 매켜보나지 진짜 매다라서 지바랑 소선전에 서비스 토바를 줘 하도 검사하고 이런 거를 주시단지 도차 내 동시당 사동 명당이 시소 도차로 소소하고 이시 신하지 유몽하지 냠데 이 신하지 냠데 요래서
And then it says, through Gunto Sambo's prayer, you beings of the 6 realms, when strong anger arises for you, neither reject nor accept it. First there is the outer Samantabhadra. So the outer Samantabhadra is the all-pervasive Dharmakaya, like space. So this is this Gunto Sambo that makes this prayer, that is all-pervasive Dharmakaya. And then the inner Samantabhadra is when strong anger arises, neither reject nor accept it, instead relax in the natural state. So then you rest within a state of self-knowing awareness, non-dual awareness. Milarepa had said, actually, the afflictions and wisdom are co-emergent, they arise together. So how does that happen? For a practitioner, for example, when anger arises, as it arises, the moment it arises, there is recognition. You recognize the anger arising. So together with the anger, co-emerging with the anger, there also is a clear knowing awareness that recognizes. And they are not separate from each other. The anger arising and the awareness recognizing it are not separate from each other. So those who do not practice, for them, this wisdom becomes self-grasping. The self-grasping is so strong. At the moment anger arises, there is no awareness at all, because the I is most important, and then they become controlled by the anger. And then many faults come from that. So when we engage in practice and anger arises, we recognize the fault in anger, and we recognize it with mindfulness. And if you recognize it if you hold it with mindfulness, the moment it arises, it will dissipate just like a wave on water, the moment it arises. So that is the inner Samantabhadra. It is the innately clear, the self-knowing awareness. And so that is this may you achieve the wisdom of clarity. That is the wisdom of clarity. So especially when anger arises and anger dissolves within mindfulness, it has a clear quality. When anger dissolves, the mind remains particularly clear. So your meditation becomes even more clarified. And then you find that the anger actually has benefited your meditation. And so therefore in the Kagyu lineage we also say that let the afflictions arise. So when afflictions arise, I want the afflictions to arise. The more arise, the better it is. Or also in the Asida of the Drupa Kagyu, in A Song of Realization, had said, when you recognize the nature of afflictions, then all suffering becomes an ocean of nectar, which means all poison is transformed into medicine. For example, it is like the precious pills, like Tibetan medicine pills. They're called precious pills. Actually, what they really are, the ingredients, is actually poison. So they consist of all kinds of heavy metals and mercury and so on. But actually, although it is poison, it is also a supreme medicine. It is powerful, like a diamond. And it is said that it can even turn away like magic and evil spells and so on. Nothing can affect it. So from the ultimate perspective, actually this inner Samantabhadra is an example of such a diamond, like a precious medicine. A diamond because it can destroy anything, it can overcome anything, but nothing can destroy it. Nothing can affect this diamond-like nature. So that is the nature of Samantabhadra. It can overcome, destroy whatever afflictions and thoughts arise. It is like an apocalyptic fire, a large fire that overcomes and burns away anything. And so now, especially here, this wisdom of clarity relates to anger, because when anger dissolves, when it is liberated in meditation, the mind remains very clear. For example, the nature of attachment is the discriminating wisdom, or the union of bliss and emptiness. And then the nature of hatred or anger is the mirror-like wisdom, the nature of clarity and emptiness. The mind is very clear. So again, the 5 afflictions co-emerge, arise together with the 5 wisdoms. So then those who have not recognized the view, and those they should practice according to the bodhisattva vehicle, the conventional bodhicitta, according to the 37 bodhisattva practices, and should resolve or eliminate their anger in that way. Because there are not many, there are only very few who have authentically, truly recognized the view. And so here we mean that first we need to recognize, we need to understand the view and the nature of the mind. Then after understanding the nature of the mind, we must habituate it, and then we realize it. And so that is actually very difficult. And there is not many who have realized the nature of the mind in this way. And if we have not accomplished that, it is more difficult to eliminate the anger, for example, only through the view. And in that case, we should resolve it with the conventional, the relative bodhicitta. So how do we do that? So all those enemies who hate one, obstructors who harm human and non-human, evil spirits and so on, all of them, without exception, have been your parents. And if you get angry at them, you're really only harming yourself and not them. So they all have been one's parents. In a past life, they have been someone that was very kind to you, someone that has helped you very much, but then you have not properly repaid their kindness. You have hurt them. For example, a parent has cared for their child, but the child only hurts the parents all the time. So in that way, we have created a karmic debt. So in that case, instead of getting angry at them, the antidote to anger is to practice patience. So that would be an excellent practice if we follow the path of the relative bodhicitta. So, or if one really has realized the view, then the view itself is sufficient. There's nothing else needed. The view itself is the single sufficient method to overcome the 84,000 different afflictions. But that is a bit difficult. So then, what is really the greatest fault in when we cultivate anger or hatred? So, for example, when we take the refuge vow, then we want to be protected by the three jewels. And then after three jewels, which one is really the most precious one? After three jewels, the most precious one to us is the Sangha. So from the Buddha appeared the Dharma, and then from the Dharma appeared the Sangha. And the Sangha is the one who shows us the path, starting with the four thoughts that turn the mind, and the relative and the ultimate, bodhicitta, and so on. So of the three jewels, the most precious one to us is the Sangha. Sangha is the one who has become liberated from suffering and therefore can show the path to liberation to others. So the Sangha comes from having practiced the Dharma. And what is the Dharma then? The Dharma is the words of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha. And there are many countless teachings, many scriptures. We can pile hundreds of scriptures up like a mountain. What is the benefit of all these? Ultimately, it is so that you give rise to love and compassion. And then what's the benefit of that? If you give rise to love and compassion, then temporarily you're born in the higher realms as a human being and so on. And ultimately you attain enlightenment. So really the ultimate protection, what will really protect you, rescue you, is love and compassion that the Sangha introduces us to. And what is it that destroys that? It is hatred, anger. When we get angry, we lose our love. So it is said hatred or anger cuts through the life force, a rope of liberation. And then we fall into the lower realms for many lifetimes without any chance for liberation. For example, it is like you're fallen into the ocean water and you're just held by a rope to be pulled out, but then the rope is cut. And when the rope is cut, you're drowning in the ocean, you cannot be rescued. So that is what happens when you get angry, or hatred is what cuts this rope of liberation. So it is very important to again and again contemplate the faults of anger or hatred.
Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani